He was the god of storms, chaos, but also of foreigners, deserts, and disorder. Feared, worshipped, hated. Set was no ordinary god. In fact, he might have been the most powerful one of them all, even though some myths say that he was merely an abstract personification of the Nile's annual flood. But in the cult of Set, he was anything but an allegory. To them, he was a violent god, a killer who murdered his own brother and nearly shattered the divine order. Welcome to my channel. Today we'll look at 5 dark truths about Set, Egypt's god of chaos and war. Viewer discretion is advised for this episode, as some of this episode may be offensive or disturbing. We, the makers of this show, in no way support or condone the actions or beliefs of the subjects featured. 5. Set was the brother of Osiris. Let's start with some good old sibling rivalry. If you know Greek mythology, then you know the name Seth. The Greeks associated him with violence, bloodshed, and pestilence. And they got that from the Egyptians, who called their god Set. So when Set smited his brother Osiris and cut his body into pieces, the Greeks had plenty of material to work with. But those who knew Set best, the Egyptians, saw him as more than just a murder god. They knew that he was a force of nature, a god who personified the annual flooding of the Nile River. Every year, the river would overflow its banks and cover the fields in rich silt, bringing life and fertility to the land. But it was also unpredictable and dangerous. It could wash away entire villages and leave people homeless and starving. Set, like the Nile, was both life-giving and destructive. And the Egyptians understood that. That's why they worshipped him as a god of chaos and disorder, because they knew that sometimes order had to be broken in order to make way for new life. But there was another reason why the Egyptians worshipped Set. He was also the god of foreigners, and the Egyptians weren't xenophobic. They knew that foreigners could bring new ideas and goods to Egypt, and they welcomed them. But they also knew that foreigners could be dangerous, that they could bring diseases and war, and they feared them. Set, like foreigners, was both exciting and scary. He represented the unknown, the wild, the untamed, and the Egyptians loved nothing more than a good mystery. They built great temples to Set all over Egypt, and they made him one of the most popular gods in their pantheon. But they never forgot that he was also a god of death and destruction. 4. He murdered Osiris to claim the throne. The story of how Set killed his brother Osiris is one of the most famous in Egyptian mythology. It's a tale of betrayal, jealousy, and revenge. Osiris was the king of Egypt, and Set was his brother. The two ruled over the kingdom together, but Set was always envious of his brother. He wanted to be king himself. One day, Osiris went to visit Set and told him that he was going to give him a beautiful throne made of ivory. Set was flattered, but he was also suspicious. Why was Osiris being so nice to him? What did he want? Set decided to test his brother. He asked him if he would sit on the throne, and Osiris agreed. As soon as Osiris sat down, however, Set unleashed a trap, and the throne crushed him. Then Set threw his brother's body into the river Nile, where it floated downstream and eventually washed up on the shore of Byblos. There it was found by some woodcutters who made a coffin out of one of the trees. They placed Osiris's body inside and set it on a ship, where it floated to the city of Sidon. In Sidon, the coffin was found by Queen Elissa, who took it to her palace and used it as a pillar to support up her house. But Set was not done with his brother's body yet. He tracked the coffin to Sidon and bribed one of Elissa's servants to bring it to him. Then he chopped it into 14 pieces and scattered them across Egypt. Each piece of the coffin was more cursed than the last. When Set was finally defeated and his power was broken, the pieces of the coffin were returned to Elissa, who was able to use them to build a new and even greater palace. 3. His rivalry with Horus lasted 80 years. After Osiris was murdered, his son Horus took it upon himself to avenge his father and defeat his uncle Set. The rivalry between Horus and Set would become one of the most epic in Egyptian mythology, lasting over 80 years and spanning 2 kingdoms. Horus and Set fought each other many times, but neither of them could defeat the other. Finally, they went to see a third-party mediator, the goddess Nephthys, who told them that they had to stop fighting and rule over Egypt together. Nephthys was right. Horus and Set had been fighting for so long that they had forgotten what it was like to be brothers. They had become so consumed with their hatred for each other that they had forgotten about everything else. But once they heard Nephthys's words, they realized that she was right. They needed to put aside their differences and rule over Egypt together. So they made peace and divided the kingdom between them. Horus became the king of the north, and Set became the king of the south. And for a while, everything was good. But the rivalry between Horus and Set did not end there. In some versions of the myth, Horus and Set continue to fight each other even after they make peace. They become mortal enemies, and their battles become legendary. Horus and Set fight each other all over Egypt. They battle each other in the sky, in the underworld, and even in the afterlife. But in the end, Horus always wins. 2. He was worshipped by soldiers and foreigners. Soldiers often feel isolated and cut off from society. They live in barracks and train for war. They're away from their families and friends, and they don't have much time for hobbies or interests. But soldiers need something to believe in. They need a god who understands them, who knows what it's like to be away from home and fight in wars. And that god is Set. Set is the god of chaos and disorder, but he's also the god of foreigners. He's the god of strangers and travelers. And he's the patron deity of Nubia, a region south of Egypt that was home to many black Africans. Set was seen as a foreigner in Egypt, and he was often worshipped by foreigners who came to Egypt to trade or fight. He was also worshipped by Nubian soldiers who served in the Egyptian army. Set was seen as a god of strength and courage, and he was invoked before battle. He was also seen as a god of protection, and he was invoked to keep soldiers safe from harm. Some pharaohs called themselves his sons. The pharaohs of Egypt were considered to be the sons of gods. They believed that they were descended from gods, and they often took on the attributes of their divine ancestors. For example, the pharaohs of the 18th dynasty were considered to be the sons of Amun, and they took on the attributes of Amun. They wore the Amun beard and the Amun crown, and they built great temples to Amun. But the pharaohs were also considered to be the sons of Set. They saw themselves as descendants of Set, and they took on the attributes of Set. For example, the pharaoh Ramesses III was considered to be the son of Set, and he built a great temple to Set at the edge of the desert. This temple was unlike any other temple in Egypt. It was made of mud brick instead of stone, and it had a thick wall around it to protect it from attack. It was also dedicated to a god of chaos and disorder, which was unusual. Most temples were dedicated to order and stability, but Ramses III was a warrior pharaoh, and he knew that sometimes order had to be broken in order to restore balance. He also knew that sometimes chaos and disorder were necessary in order to create order and stability. And so he built this temple to Set at the edge of the desert, far from the hustle and bustle of the royal court, where he could go to escape the pressures of kingship and reconnect with his true self, the son of Set, the god of chaos and disorder. Set was more than just a god of chaos and disorder. He was a god of foreigners and strangers. He was a god of strength and courage. He was a god of protection and independence. He was a god who understood the struggles of soldiers and warriors. And he was a god who taught pharaohs that sometimes order had to be broken in order to restore balance. Thanks for watching. What do you think about Set? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. See you next time.